My name is Emily Carter, and I'm 29 years old. 3 years ago, I walked away from my family and I never looked back. I had built a life for myself as a software engineer in Seattle, far removed from my parents' Boston estate and their beloved golden child, my sister, Jessica. Then came the call that changed everything. My parents had died in a car accident, and their lawyer requested my presence at the reading of the will. I almost didn't go. Why would I? They had signed everything over to Jess years ago, or so I thought. Before I tell you how I walked into that lawyer's office and changed my life forever, drop a comment below telling me where you're watching from, and don't forget to hit subscribe to join me on this journey of reclaiming what was rightfully mine. I grew up in suburban Boston. Material things were never lacking in our household. My parents, Richard and Elizabeth Montgomery, had built Montgomery Properties into one of the most successful real estate development firms in New England. Our 5-bedroom colonial stood on 3 acres of perfectly manicured lawn. We had a swimming pool, a tennis court, and even a guest house. From the outside, we looked like the picture-perfect American family. But behind closed doors, the truth was clear. Jessica was the favorite, the chosen one. It started with little things. At Christmas, Jess would get the expensive doll she'd begged for all year. I'd unwrap educational toys my parents thought would develop my potential. Birthday parties told the same story. Jess's celebrations were extravagant: pony rides, professional entertainers, rented venues. Mine were simple: a homemade cake in the kitchen with a few friends from school. "We're just respecting your different personalities," Mom would say when I asked why Jess's 10th birthday was at a skating rink while mine was celebrated with pizza and paper hats. "Jess needs more social stimulation. You're more introverted." That was their explanation for everything: different personalities, different needs, different futures. In 3rd grade, I won the regional spelling bee, beating students 3 grades above me. My parents came, but left immediately after. Jess had a soccer game. "It's just a spelling contest," Dad said. "Cassie's team is counting on her." When I brought home straight A's, the response was always the same: "That's expected of you, Emily." But when Jess managed a B- in algebra after nearly failing, my parents took her to dinner at one of the city's finest restaurants. "You have to understand, your sister struggles with math," Mom explained. "We need to encourage her when she puts in effort." So, I pushed harder. I joined every academic club, entered every competition, graduated valedictorian. At my graduation ceremony, I looked out at the crowd and saw my parents checking their watches. Jess had an equestrian competition that afternoon. MIT accepted me with a partial scholarship. Asked my parents to help cover the rest. They refused. "Business school would be more practical," Dad said. "You could join the family company after graduation." "But I want to study computer science," I argued. "The tech industry is the future." Mom's lips thinned. "Emily, we've already discussed this. Jessica will be attending Wharton in the fall. She'll be taking over Montgomery Properties eventually. You need to be realistic about your place in the family." That was the first time they'd said it so plainly. Jess would inherit everything. It had already been decided. So I took out student loans. I worked part-time jobs. I ate ramen noodles in a cramped apartment with 3 roommates, and I excelled. By senior year, I had job offers from several major tech companies. I chose a promising startup in Seattle, partly for the opportunity and partly for the distance it gave me from Boston. I built a life there, made friends, advanced in my career, succeeded on my own terms. Then came my cousin Olivia's wedding 3 years ago. I couldn't avoid going home. My parents insisted I stay at the family estate rather than a hotel. "We never see you anymore," Mom complained. "Would it kill you to spend time with your family?" At the rehearsal dinner the night before the wedding, everything fell apart. Dad tapped his glass and stood, beaming. "We have an announcement," he said. "As you all know, Montgomery Properties has been growing steadily. We're expanding into commercial developments along the eastern seaboard, and it's time we start planning for the future. So we're pleased to announce that Jessica will officially be joining the company as Executive Vice President of Development, with the intention of taking over as CEO when I retire in 5 years." Applause filled the room. Jess smiled modestly, but I saw the triumph in her eyes when she glanced at me. "What about Emily?" asked my Aunt Charlotte. "Will she be joining too?" Mom laughed lightly. "Oh, Emily has her computers in Seattle. She's made it clear she's not interested in real estate." I sat there frozen. They had never asked me, never even considered that I might want a role in the family business. They had been grooming Jess for years, while telling me I needed to be realistic about my place. I excused myself and went to the study to catch my breath. Dad followed. "You know this is how it had to be," he said, not unkindly. "Jess has the personality for this business, the charm, the social skills. You're brilliant, Emily, but you're too analytical, too rigid. This business is about relationships, intuition. Your sister feels the market. You analyze it to death." "You never gave me a chance," I said quietly. "You decided when we were children that she was the heir, and I was the spare, and you've been justifying it ever since." Dad's face hardened. "This attitude is exactly why. Why wouldn't you succeed in this business? Because you take everything so personally. Business isn't personal." "Except when it's family business," I replied. "Then it's nothing but personal." That was the last real conversation I ever had with my father. At the wedding the next day, I maintained a polite facade, smiling for photos, making small talk, pretending. The day after, I flew back to Seattle and blocked my parents' numbers. 3 years of silence followed. 3 years of building a life on my own terms, without the crushing weight of their expectations and constant disappointment, until the call came from Mr. Anderson, the family lawyer. Richard and Elizabeth Montgomery had been killed when their car skidded off an icy road on the way home from their anniversary dinner. And despite everything, I needed to be present for the reading of the will. But that dinner, the one that severed our relationship, was never just about a business announcement. It was the final straw, the culmination of a lifetime spent feeling invisible in my own home. After my father followed me to the study and told me I didn't have what it took to succeed in the family business, Jess appeared in the doorway, champagne flute in hand. "Don't be dramatic, Amy," she said, using the nickname she knew I hated. "It's not like this is a surprise to anyone. I've been interning at the company since high school." While I was actively discouraged, I replied. She rolled her eyes. "You never showed interest. You were always buried in your coding projects, or whatever." "Because every time I did express interest in the business, I was told it wasn't my strength," I said. "It's hard to show interest when you're constantly being redirected." Jess let out a dramatic sigh. "Look, we all have our lanes. Mine is business. Yours is technical stuff. That's just how it is." Dad nodded. "Jessica has been preparing for this her entire life. She majored in business. She has the right connections. She understands how things work in our world." "Because you gave her those opportunities," I said. "You sent her to cotillion and country club events. You introduced her to your business partners. You took her to development sites. You never once offered me those same chances." Mom entered the room at that moment. "Emily, please. You're making a scene. This is Jessica's moment. Can't you just be happy for your sister?" That was always the refrain. Be happy for your sister. Don't overshadow your sister. Don't make this about you. I looked at the three of them standing there. Dad, irritated. Mom, anxious about appearances. Jess, smug and triumphant. And something inside me finally snapped. "I'm leaving," I said quietly. "Don't be ridiculous," Mom said. "The wedding is tomorrow. I'll be at the wedding. I'll smile for the photos. I'll toast the happy couple. And then I'm done. I'm done pretending we're a loving family when I've never been more than an afterthought to all of you." "Now you're just being childish," Dad snapped. "No," I said. "I'm finally being honest. You've made your choice clear. Jess gets everything, the attention, the opportunities, the business, probably eventually this house. Fine. She can have it all. But she doesn't get to have me too. I won't stick around to watch the Jessica show anymore." I walked out of the study and up to my old bedroom. The next day, I fulfilled my obligations. I hugged the bride, danced with cousins, and avoided my immediate family as much as I could. The day after, I was on a plane back to Seattle. Mom left tearful voicemails for a few weeks. Dad sent a cold, formal email suggesting we take time to cool off. Jess texted, "Way to make everything about you as usual." I changed my phone number. I created email filters to send their messages to a folder I never checked. I buried myself in work and started rebuilding my life, without the shadow of their disapproval following me. My friend Sophia became my anchor in Seattle. She invited me to spend holidays with her family. Her husband, Nathan, introduced me to rock climbing, a hobby I never expected to love. I built a chosen family, a community that valued me for who I truly was. Occasionally, news filtered in. A mutual friend mentioned Jess's promotion. An old classmate congratulated me on my parents' latest real estate project. I nodded, smiled, and changed the subject. The strangest part? I discovered, by pure accident, during a run-in with my mother's cousin at a conference in San Francisco, that my parents had rewritten our estrangement as my decision. "They said you found the family business too limiting," she said, looking awkward. "That you wanted to forge your own path. Elizabeth said you're very independent and they're giving you space." They had recast themselves as understanding parents, giving their strong-willed daughter room to grow. They had turned my rejection into their generosity. I laughed bitterly that night in my hotel room. Of course they had. Anything to preserve the illusion of the perfect family. Anything to avoid facing the truth, that they had driven their younger daughter away with years of favoritism and neglect. So when my Aunt Charlotte called to tell me about the accident, I felt nothing. Just a hollow stillness where grief was supposed to be. "They were coming home from celebrating their 35th anniversary," she said, voice breaking. The roads were icy. Richard lost control of the car on a curve. They were killed instantly. "I'm sorry," I replied automatically. "The funeral is on Saturday," she continued. "Jessica is handling the arrangements. She wasn't sure if you'd want to be involved." Of course she wasn't. Jess had probably enjoyed having our parents all to herself these past 3 years. "I'll book a flight," I said, surprising even myself. 2 days later, the call came from Mr. Anderson. "Miss Carter." His voice was formal when he spoke. "I'm the Montgomery family attorney. I understand you'll be in Boston for the funeral. We'll need you to stay for the reading of the will on Monday morning." "Is that necessary?" I asked. I assumed everything would go to Jessica. There was a pause. "It would be in your best interest to attend," he said carefully. "There are matters that concern you directly." I almost declined. What was the point? But something in his tone made me pause. Made me curious.
"Fine," I said.
Monday morning. What I didn't know then was that Monday would change everything. That the carefully constructed narrative of my family would finally crumble. That truths my parents had hidden for years would come to light. And that I would walk into that lawyer's office and watch my sister's smug smile vanish, her carefully laid plans unraveling before her eyes. Landing in Boston felt like stepping back in time. The familiar skyline, the thick Boston accent of the taxi driver, even the cold clarity of the winter light, it all stirred memories, both warm and painful. I had turned down Aunt Charlotte's offer to stay at the family home. Instead, I was staying with Diane's parents, the Reynoldses, who still lived in the suburb where we had grown up. They welcomed me with quiet sympathy and gave me the space I needed to process everything. "You can stay as long as you need," Mrs. Reynolds said gently, showing me to their guest room. "We always thought of you as another daughter." "Thank you," I replied, my throat tightening with emotion. The Reynolds had always treated me with a warmth my own parents rarely managed. They had shown up to my science fairs and piano recitals, events my parents skipped for Jessica's competitions. The day before the funeral, I decided to drive through my old neighborhood. I passed our former home, a stately colonial, set far back from the road. The sight of it struck me with a strange pang. Not quite longing, more like unfinished business. I continued on to the daily grind, the local coffee shop where I used to study after school. It hadn't changed much. Same worn leather chairs, same chalkboard menu, same warm scent of coffee and cinnamon. I was waiting for my order when I heard a familiar voice. "Emily?" Is that you? I turned. Lauren Taylor, my old chemistry lab partner from high school. We'd never been close, but we'd always been friendly.
Lauren.
Hi, I said, accepting her quick hug. How are you? I'm good. Teaching chemistry at the high school now, if you can believe it. She smiled, then hesitated, her expression shifting. I was so sorry to hear about your parents. Just awful. Thank you, I said automatically. She glanced around, then lowered her voice. Honestly, I was surprised to hear you were coming back after everything. I frowned. What do you mean? Lauren looked a little uncomfortable. Oh, after you moved away, your parents told people you'd chosen to walk away. Jessica said you found your own path in tech and didn't really look back. She hesitated again. There were even rumors you had some sort of breakdown after college, that you couldn't handle the pressure of joining the family business. Before I could respond, my coffee order was called. I used the moment to steady my expression. When I turned back to her, my voice was calm. Interesting version of events. Lauren must have realized she'd stepped into something delicate. Well, you know how people talk. I'm sure it was all exaggerated. I'm sure, I said coolly. Nice seeing you, Lauren. I left the coffee shop, seething. A breakdown? Couldn't handle the pressure? I had graduated top of my class from MIT, helped build a successful tech startup from the ground up. Meanwhile, Jessica had been handed a vice presidency at our parents' company. No resume, no effort, no proving ground. My next stop was the cemetery. I needed a quiet moment with my thoughts before the funeral, before the expectations and performances began. My parents were buried in the family section at Oakwood Cemetery, beneath a sprawling old oak tree. Freshly turned soil, covered in roses, my mother's favorite. I stood there, waiting for grief to hit me. But it didn't. What I felt was anger, regret, a deep, hollow sense of loss, not just for their lives, but for the relationship we never had. I wish you had seen me, I whispered. Really seen me. They did, in the end. I turned, startled. An elderly woman stood nearby. It took a moment to recognize her, Helen, my parents' longtime housekeeper. But to me, she'd always been more like a grandmother. Helen, I said, moving to hug her. Her familiar scent, lavender and lemon, brought tears to my eyes. My dear girl, she said, patting my back. I've missed you terribly. What did you mean, they saw me in the end? I asked as we sat down on a nearby bench. Helen looked toward the graves. Your father changed these last few months. He kept going through old photo albums, watching videos of you as a child. He said he'd made mistakes. I swallowed. Did he try to reach out to me? He said he did, Helen replied. But you changed your number. He sent letters. I never got any letters, I said, frowning. Helen's brow furrowed. That's strange. He gave them to Jessica to mail. She said she had your address. A chill ran through me. Jess said she had my address?
Yes.
She told your parents you were moving a lot in Seattle, that they should send everything through her. But I haven't moved once in 3 years, I said. My address is public. It's on my company's website. Helen's face grew still. Did my parents change their will recently? I asked suddenly. She looked surprised. I couldn't say for sure. But your father was meeting with Mr. Anderson quite often in the months before the accident. And once, I overheard him on the phone. He said something needed to be made right. As I drove back to the Reynoldses, her words echoed in my mind. Something needed to be made right. And Monday morning, I was about to find out exactly what. That evening, my mind wouldn't stop racing. Had my parents truly started to have second thoughts about cutting me out? Had Jess intercepted their attempts to reconcile? I stopped at a red light, glancing at my surroundings, and realized I was only a few blocks from our old house. On impulse, I turned down the familiar street and parked across from the property. The lights were on downstairs. Jess was probably inside, preparing for the funeral. As I sat watching, a car pulled into the driveway. Jess stepped out from the driver's side, followed by her husband, Ryan, from the passenger. They were laughing about something as they walked toward the front door. Just before stepping inside, Jess paused and looked straight at my car. Even from across the street, I saw the moment her smile faded. She said something to Ryan, who turned and frowned in my direction. Then, they disappeared inside, closing the door firmly behind them. That night, I couldn't sleep. Helen's words echoed in my mind. Your father changed in these last months. He was looking through old family albums. He kept saying he'd made mistakes. Restless, I got up and rifled through my suitcase until I found the only family photo I'd kept after the estrangement, a picture from a summer vacation in Maine when I was 12. We were all smiling on a sailboat, wind whipping our hair. My father had his arm around my shoulders. I stared at that image for a long time, trying to reconcile it with the man who once told me I didn't have what it took to be part of the family business. The man who, at every turn, had chosen Jessica over me. But as I studied the photo more closely, something caught my eye. Barely visible in the background of the marina was a sign. Montgomery Landing.
I had forgotten about that place.
It was a small marina development my grandfather had built. The very project that launched Montgomery Properties. Why did that detail feel important? I couldn't quite say. But the thought stayed with me as I finally drifted into a fitful sleep. The next morning was the funeral. It was exactly what I expected. A carefully curated display of Boston's elite paying their respects to two of their own. Jessica gave a tearful eulogy, painting a picture of a close-knit family and loving parents who had supported both their daughters in pursuing their unique paths. I sat in the front row, my expression neutral, as I listened to her rewrite our family history for the public. I didn't speak. I accepted condolences with quiet dignity, avoided being alone with Jessica, and left the reception at the house the moment it was socially acceptable to do so. That evening, Mr. Anderson called. Miss Carter, he said, his tone polite but urgent. I wonder if you might come to my office tomorrow morning before the official reading. What kind of matters? I asked cautiously. It would be better to discuss in person, he replied. Shall we say 9 a.m.? The full reading is scheduled for 11. I agreed, curiosity outweighing my reluctance to spend more time entangled in family business. The next morning, I arrived at Anderson Legal at precisely 9 o'clock. The receptionist showed me straight into Mr. Anderson's office, a wood-paneled room lined with leather-bound law books and carrying the scent of lemon oil and old paper. Edward Anderson had been the Montgomery family attorney for as long as I could remember. Now in his 60s, his silver hair and lined face gave him a distinguished air, but his piercing blue eyes were still sharp and his voice steady. Emily, he said warmly, rising to shake my hand. Thank you for coming early. Please sit down. Once I was seated, he removed his glasses and looked at me directly. I wanted to speak with you privately, he said, because what will transpire at the official reading may come as a shock to certain parties. I thought it only fair to prepare you. Prepare me for what? I asked. I'm not expecting anything from the estate. That's precisely why we need to talk. He opened a drawer and took out a thick folder. Are you familiar with your grandfather's original trust conditions for Montgomery Properties? I shook my head.
No.
My grandfather died when I was 3. I know he founded the company, but not much more than that. William Montgomery was a remarkable man, Mr. Anderson said. He built the company from the ground up, starting with that small marina development in Maine. Montgomery Landing. The name sent a jolt through me. The marina, from the photo. He established a trust to control the company after his death, Mr. Anderson continued. Your father was named as trustee and CEO, but with very specific conditions regarding succession. He slid a document across the desk. This is the original trust language. I began scanning it. Legal jargon made the reading slow, but one paragraph stopped me cold. Upon the retirement or death of Richard Montgomery, control of Montgomery Properties and associated assets shall pass to the heir who demonstrates the qualities William Montgomery valued: integrity, innovation, financial acumen, and commitment to ethical business practices. This determination shall be made by the trustee based on objective evaluation of potential heirs. I looked up. This doesn't say the heir has to be the oldest child. Correct, Mr. Anderson confirmed. William Montgomery believed in meritocracy, not primogeniture. He came from nothing and built his success on hard work, vision, and integrity. He wanted leadership to be earned, not inherited by birth order. Did my father know this? Of course. But over time, he and your mother developed their own beliefs about succession. They felt Jessica's personality was more suited to the business. I felt the familiar sting of that judgment. So, they groomed her for it from the beginning. Yes, he said quietly. But about 6 months ago, your father came to see me. He brought this. Mr. Anderson reached back into the drawer and pulled out a sealed envelope. He asked me to give this to you after his death, Mr. Anderson said gently, whether or not you attended the will reading. My hands trembled slightly as I opened the envelope. Inside was a single letter, written in my father's familiar handwriting. Emily, if you're reading this, then I'm gone, and I've lost the chance to say these things to you in person. That's my fault. I let pride and stubbornness keep me from reaching out the way I should have after our falling out. I've been watching your career from afar. The innovation you've brought to your company. The ethical way you've approached technology. The financial success you've achieved through your own merit, without leaning on the family name. You are your grandfather's granddaughter in every way that matters. Jessica has qualities your mother and I always valued: social grace, charm, the ability to make people feel at ease. But we were wrong to prioritize those over the values that built Montgomery Properties in the first place. Your sister lacks your integrity and vision. I've come to realize she views the company as an inheritance, not a responsibility. I tried to contact you many times over the past year. I sent letters. I called numbers that didn't work. I even drove by your office in Seattle last spring. I saw you through the window, so confident, so successful, and I lost my nerve. I've worked with Edward to make things right. By the time you read this, changes will have been made to honor your grandfather's original vision for the company. I hope someday you'll forgive me for not seeing what should have been clear all along. With love and regret.
Dad.
I folded the letter, my chest tight, as I fought back tears. He tried to contact me. I murmured. Mr. Anderson nodded. Many times. He was quite distressed when he heard nothing back. I never received anything, I said quietly. Helen told me Jessica was supposed to mail the letters. Mr. Anderson's expression darkened. I see. That's concerning, though not entirely surprising, given what else we've uncovered. He reached into a folder and retrieved another document. After your father's change of heart, we initiated an audit of company operations. We discovered some questionable activity tied to Jessica's role as executive vice president. What kind of activity? I asked. There's evidence she was preparing to sell off several key company assets, properties that have been in the family for generations. Sell them? I repeated, stunned. Why would she do that? To extract maximum short-term value, he said, even if it meant sacrificing the company's long-term stability. The proposed buyers included Ethan Developments. Their CEO, coincidentally, is a close friend of her husband's. I sat back in my chair, reeling. She was planning to dismantle the company. Not completely, he said, but enough to raise serious concerns. He checked his watch. The others will be arriving soon. There's one more thing you should know. I looked up. Your father amended his will 3 weeks before the accident. The changes are significant and fully legal. What kind of changes? I asked. You'll hear the specifics during the reading, he said. But I wanted to prepare you for Jessica's reaction. She isn't aware of any of this. I left his office in a daze and was escorted to a nearby conference room to wait for the others. My thoughts were spinning. My father had tried to make amends. He had realized his mistake. And now, after everything, he was about to set things right. For the first time since learning of my parents' deaths, I felt something close to real grief. Not just for what had been lost, but for what might have been if we'd had a chance to reconcile. At precisely 11 o'clock, I was shown into the main conference room. Jessica was already there, seated at the long mahogany table, Ryan beside her. She wore an elegant black dress and our mother's pearl necklace. When she saw me, her eyes widened slightly, then narrowed. I didn't realize you'd be staying for the will reading, she said coolly. I thought you'd be heading back to Seattle. Mr. Anderson asked me to attend. I replied, taking a seat across from her. Ryan gave me a stiff nod. We'd never been close. He came from Jess's world, prep school, Ivy League, yacht clubs. He always treated me with a kind of bemused politeness, like he was humoring someone beneath him. Other relatives began filtering in, aunts, uncles, cousins, and a few of my parents' longtime business partners. Helen slipped in quietly and sat near the back. When our eyes met, she offered a small, encouraging smile. At 11:15, Mr. Anderson entered the room, flanked by two associates carrying folders and legal documents. He offered brief condolences, then began. We are gathered today for the reading of the last will and testament of Richard William Montgomery and Elizabeth Helen Montgomery, he said. Before we begin, I must note that this document was amended 3 weeks prior to the decedent's passing. The amendment was properly executed, witnessed, and is legally binding. I saw Jess sit up straighter. Her brow furrowed ever so slightly. This was clearly news to her. Mr. Anderson began with the smaller bequests, family heirlooms to cousins, artwork to museums, charitable donations. Jess visibly relaxed, even smiled slightly when he announced that she would inherit the family home and its contents. Then came the part everyone had been waiting for. And now, Mr. Anderson said, we come to the matter of business interests, specifically Montgomery Properties and all associated entities. Richard Montgomery, in his capacity as trustee of the William Montgomery Trust, conducted a thorough evaluation of potential successors in accordance with the original conditions set by William Montgomery himself. Jess leaned forward, her hand sliding into Ryan's. Her expression was expectant. This evaluation, Mr. Anderson continued, included a review of leadership skills, financial judgment, ethical standards, and demonstrated innovation. External consultants were engaged to provide an objective assessment. Tension thickened in the room. Jess still wore a confident smile, but I saw the flicker of concern in Ryan's eyes. Mr. Anderson cleared his throat. Based on these evaluations, and in alignment with William Montgomery's original intent that the company be led by the heir who most exemplifies the founding values of integrity, innovation, financial responsibility, and ethical leadership, he paused, glancing around the room. Control of Montgomery Properties shall pass not to Jessica and Montgomery, but to Emily Carter. Richard Montgomery determined that control of Montgomery Properties and its associated assets shall pass to. Mr. Anderson paused, lifting his eyes from the document to look directly at Jessica. Emily Elizabeth Carter. The room went utterly still. Jess's smile froze in place before fading entirely. There must be some mistake, she said finally, her voice tight. There is no mistake, Ms. Montgomery, Mr. Anderson replied calmly. Your father was very clear in his determination. The amended will includes a thorough explanation of the evaluation process and findings. This is absurd, Ryan cut in, his tone bristling with disbelief. Jessica has been working at the company for years. Emily hasn't even been involved in the family's life. That concern was addressed in the addendum, Mr. Thornton said, flipping a page. Richard Montgomery noted that, despite physical distance, Emily demonstrated exceptional business leadership through her work at Next Tech Solutions, growing the company's valuation from $10 million to $250 million in just 3 years. Her commitment to ethical innovation and sound financial management aligns more closely with the values established by William Montgomery. Jessica's face had gone pale. When was this amendment made? She asked sharply. Dad was under a lot of stress in his final months. He wasn't thinking clearly. The amendment was executed 23 days before his death, Mr. Anderson said. Both of your parents were evaluated by their physician that same week and found to be of sound mind. Additionally, the conditions of the trust weren't established by your father, but by your grandfather. Your father was simply carrying out his fiduciary responsibilities as trustee. I don't believe this, Jessica snapped. Her voice was rising now. Emily hasn't been part of this family for 3 years. She walked away. She doesn't care about our legacy or the company. That's not true, I said, my voice echoing from the doorway. All heads turned as I stepped inside the room. I had slipped out moments earlier to collect myself, but this was the moment I had waited for, the chance to set the record straight. I didn't walk away from the family, I said steadily, walking toward the table. I was pushed out, and when I tried to stay connected on equal terms, I was gradually shut out. That's not true, Jess protested, but even she sounded unsure. Isn't it? I replied, locking eyes with her. Helen told me Dad tried to reach out to me multiple times. Letters I never received. Phone calls to numbers you claimed were disconnected. Jess, did you know about those? Her eyes flicked away. He might have mentioned wanting to contact you. And did you give him my actual address? I pressed. Or did you tell him I was moving around and he should send everything through you? Ryan was staring at her now, a shadow of realization crossing his face. Jessica, he said slowly, did you intercept communications from your parents to Emily? Her composure cracked. I was protecting them. She abandoned the family. She would have just hurt them again. That wasn't your decision to make, I said quietly. You robbed us all of the chance to reconcile. You stole that from me and from them. Mr. Anderson cleared his throat. If I may continue, he picked up a fresh page. The will stipulates that Emily Carter shall assume the position of Chief Executive Officer of Montgomery Properties, effective immediately upon her acceptance. Jessica Montgomery will retain her current title of Executive Vice President, subject to a 90-day performance review. Jess shot to her feet. This is a travesty. I'm contesting the will. That is your legal right, Mr. Anderson replied evenly. However, your father anticipated this. He left a video message to be played in the event of a dispute. From his briefcase, he withdrew a tablet and set it on the table. Would you like me to play it now, or reconsider your position? Jess clenched her jaw, then gave a stiff nod. Play it. Mr. Anderson tapped the screen. The tablet flickered to life, and my father's face appeared. He looked older than I remembered, tired, worn, but his eyes were clear.
Steady.
If you're watching this, he began, then Jessica is contesting my decision. Let me be absolutely clear. This decision was made with full mental clarity and deep reflection. Jess, I love you. You have many strengths, but in recent years I've grown concerned about the choices you've made, especially your tendency to prioritize short-term profits over the long-term health of the company. The Ethan Developments deal, for example, would have traded away the company's legacy for temporary gains. Jess went pale. Emily, my father continued, if you're watching, I hope you can forgive an old man for taking far too long to recognize what should have been obvious. You are your grandfather's true heir, in values, in vision, in spirit. My decision is final. It is legally sound, and it honors the future of this company. He looked directly into the camera, his expression resolute. This is what's right. The video ended. Silence fell over the room, thick and weighty. Jess gathered her purse, fury trembling just beneath her carefully crafted exterior. This isn't over, she muttered. Come on, Ryan. She turned sharply, storming toward the door. Ryan lingered a moment longer. Then he looked at me. For what it's worth, he said, voice quiet. I didn't know about the letters. That wasn't right. Then he followed her out. Mr. Anderson resumed reading the remaining provisions of the will, but I barely heard any of it. My mind was spinning, my father's final words, Jess's betrayal, the staggering reality that Montgomery Properties was now mine to lead. When the reading concluded and the others had cleared out, I stayed seated, staring at the now dark screen of the tablet that had held my father's last message to me. Helen came over and sat beside me, placing a gentle hand on mine. He really did try, Emily, she said softly. He talked about you all the time in those last months. He was proud, so proud, of everything you'd built on your own. I nodded, unable to speak past the lump in my throat. What will you do now? She asked. It was the question I'd been asking myself ever since Mr. Anderson first told me my father had changed his mind. And now, I finally had the answer. What was I supposed to do with this inheritance? This company I'd been told all my life I wasn't cut out to lead? I think, I said slowly, I'm going to honor my grandfather's values. And maybe in doing that, I'll finally find peace with the memory of my parents, too. Helen gave my hand a warm squeeze. William would have been proud. And in the end, so were Richard and Elizabeth. As I stepped out of Mr. Anderson's office into the cold Boston air, I knew the real work was just beginning. Jess wouldn't take this quietly. The company would need steady leadership through a turbulent transition, and I'd have to find a way to juggle my life in Seattle with this new responsibility rooted in Boston. But for the first time in years, I felt something I hadn't in a long time. Certainty. A deep, grounded sense that I was where I was meant to be. The road ahead wouldn't be easy. But at least now, I was finally walking the path I was always meant to take. The next morning, I walked into the Montgomery Properties headquarters in downtown Boston. The receptionist's eyes widened when I gave her my name. "Miss Harrington, we weren't expecting you until next week." "I decided to get an early start," I replied, offering a small smile. "Is my sister in?" She hesitated. "Miss Montgomery is in a meeting with the executive team." She asked not to be disturbed. "I think she'll want to make an exception," I said, calmly but firmly. "Please let her know I'm here." Minutes later, I was led to the executive conference room. Jess sat at the head of the table, surrounded by men in expensive suits. She glanced up, visibly irritated at the sight of me. "We're in the middle of something, Emily." "I can see that," I said, keeping my tone even. "I'd like to join, since this seems to be a strategy session for the company I now lead." One of the executives, a silver-haired man I recognized as CFO Gregory Foster, looked between us in surprise. "I thought Jessica was overseeing the transition after your parents." "There's been a change," I said, taking a seat across from Jess. "As of yesterday, I am the CEO of Montgomery Properties. Mr. Anderson should have sent official notice this morning." A ripple of murmurs passed around the table. Jess's face flushed. "This is a temporary situation," she said sharply. "You're welcome to pursue any legal challenges you see fit," I replied. "But in the meantime, I expect to be included in all executive discussions." Now, what were we reviewing? Gregory cleared his throat. "We were going over the Ethan proposal for the acquisition of the waterfront properties."
Ah,
The Ethan deal. I opened my tablet. "I've reviewed that proposal. Selling those properties at 20% below market value raises red flags, especially considering Ryan's connection to Ethan's CEO." The room went silent. Jess's expression hardened. "That's a serious accusation." "It's not an accusation," I said coolly. "It's an observation, one supported by the documentation my father included in his final filings. If there's a sound business rationale for the discount, perhaps you'd like to walk us through it." She didn't. After a weak attempt to dress it up as a strategic partnership, she abruptly ended the meeting. One by one, the executives filed out. Once the door closed behind the last of them, Jess rounded on me. "You have no idea what you're doing. You're going to destroy everything Mom and Dad built." That's rich coming from someone who is trying to sell off key assets to her husband's friend. "You don't understand," she snapped. "Those deals were more complicated than they look on paper." "Then explain them," I said, my voice sharper now. "Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like you were preparing to get the company the second you had full control." She didn't answer. Instead, she shoved papers into her bag with angry, erratic movements. "This company has been my life for 10 years. You don't just get to walk in and take over." "I didn't just walk in," I shot back. "Dad made this decision, after evaluating both of us using grandfather's original standards." "He was confused," she hissed, riddled with guilt. "You have no idea what he was like after you left." "I would have," I said coldly, "if you hadn't intercepted every letter, every call, every attempt he made to reach me." Her expression faltered, just for a second. "I was protecting him," she muttered. "No, you were protecting yourself," I said. "Because if we'd reconciled, your little illusion of sole heir might have fallen apart." She slammed her folder shut. "You've always thought you were better than the rest of us. That's why you never fit in." "No," I said evenly. "I just didn't fit into the mold you and Mom and Dad forced on me. That's not the same as not belonging. Before she could retort, a knock came at the door. Mr. Anderson stepped in, looking graver than I'd ever seen him. "I'm sorry to interrupt," he said, "but there's a matter that needs immediate attention." He set a folder on the table. "These documents were locked in your father's personal safe. I've only just accessed them." I opened the folder. A wave of cold swept through me. Emails, financial reports, records of consulting fees paid to shell companies, money trails that looped back to Ryan's family. "Jess," I said, my voice low, "what is this?" Her face had gone white. "Where did you get those?" "From your father's safe," Mr. Anderson said. He was conducting an internal investigation in the months before his death. The documents revealed a pattern: mismanaged funds, inflated expenses, quiet deals made without board approval, and, worst of all, active negotiations with competitors to sell off-core company assets. "You weren't planning to sell parts of the company," I said slowly, the truth crystallizing. "You were already doing it, quietly, bit by bit, behind everyone's backs." "It wasn't like that," she said, but her voice was flat, defeated. "Then explain," I said. "Because everything I see here suggests you were dismantling Montgomery properties for your own gain." She looked away. "The business model was outdated," she whispered. "Ryan and I had ideas to modernize. But Dad wouldn't listen." "Modernize," I echoed. "By bleeding the company dry through sweetheart deals with your husband's college buddy?" She said nothing. For the first time, I saw her not as my sister, but as a threat my father had tried to stop. A threat I would now have to manage. And the full weight of my new reality finally settled on me. This wasn't just about family anymore. It was about legacy, accountability, and saving what was left. He was stuck in the past. Jess's voice was flat. "So yes, we did what was necessary." Mr. Anderson cleared his throat. "Ms. Montgomery, your actions may constitute a breach of fiduciary duty. Your father was in the process of removing you from your position entirely before the accident occurred." That revelation hung heavy in the air. Not only had Dad decided I was the right one to lead, but he'd also uncovered Jess's betrayal, her active role in undermining the company he had spent his life building. The door opened. Ryan stepped in. "The board members are arriving for the emergency meeting," he said. Then he froze as he caught sight of Mr. Anderson. "What emergency meeting?" I asked. Jess straightened, regaining composure. "I called the board. We're voting to contest the will and maintain the current leadership during the legal challenge." "That won't be necessary," came a voice from the hall. Gregory Foster stepped into the room, followed by several other board members. His expression was unreadable. "We've reviewed the materials Mr. Anderson provided this morning," he said, "including the amended will, the evaluation criteria, and, most importantly, the documents detailing concerning financial activity under the current executive leadership." Ryan's jaw clenched. "What evidence?" Gregory placed another folder on the table. "Our internal audit team had been investigating issues for months, authorized by your father. Emily wouldn't have known, it was confidential. But the findings are consistent with what was discovered in Richard's personal records." He turned to Jess. "The board has unanimously voted to uphold your father's final wishes. Emily Carter will assume the role of CEO immediately. Your position, Jessica, is under formal review, pending a full investigation." Jess's head snapped up. She looked around, searching for support, and found none. "This is a coup," she spat. "My sister walks back into our lives after 3 years, and you just hand her the company?" "No one handed me anything," I said, standing. "Dad made a decision, based on merit, not sentiment. Just as grandfather intended. And your own actions only proved he made the right call." She gathered her things in stiff silence. Ryan followed suit. At the doorway, she turned to me. "This isn't over, Emily. Not by a long shot." Then they were gone. The board members approached, each introducing themselves properly. Many had known me as a child, but they now extended professional courtesy and confidence in my leadership. They expressed support during what would be a delicate transition. Once the room had emptied, I remained behind. I stared out over the Boston skyline, trying to process everything. Only days ago, I'd returned expecting to say goodbye. Now I was responsible for steering the company that defined my family legacy. My phone buzzed. It was a text from Sophia. "How's it going? Need an escape plan yet?" I smiled faintly and typed back. "It's complicated, but I think I'm exactly where I need to be." That evening, I returned to the family home, my home now according to the will. Helen was waiting as always. She had stayed on through the years, the last stable thread of my childhood. "I found something you might want to see," she said, leading me to my father's study. On the desk sat a worn, leather-bound journal. "He started this after your falling out," she explained. "When he couldn't reach you, he began writing instead. Said maybe one day you'd read it." With trembling fingers, I opened the cover. Page after page was filled with my father's handwriting, notes, memories, regrets, and reflections. Some were about business, some about family, all of it personal. October 15th. Watched a CNBC segment on Next Tech. Emily was being interviewed, confident, articulate, ethical. In that moment, I saw my father in her. The same passion, the same integrity. How did I miss that for so long? November 30th. Audit team raised troubling issues. Jessica's explanations don't hold up. I fear we made a mistake in how we raised the girls. William would be disappointed. January 10th. Met with Edward. Told him I'm amending the will to reflect my father's intentions. It's the right thing to do, even if it causes upheaval. I just hope I get the chance to explain to Emily, and that she'll forgive me. The final entry was dated just 3 days before the accident. "If you're reading this, Emily, it means I ran out of time. Your mother, and I owe you an apology. We let our assumptions blind us. We didn't see you for who you really were. You deserved better from us. The company, our legacy, is in the right hands with you. Better hands than with your sister, or even me. You are William Montgomery's true heir, in every way that matters. I hope someday you can forgive us for how long it took to finally see it." I closed the journal, tears spilling freely. The reconciliation I'd believed impossible had been closer than I realized. My father had seen me, understood me, believed in me, just too late to say it out loud. It couldn't undo the years of distance, the hurt of being pushed aside. But it meant something. It gave me something to hold on to. Helen placed a gentle hand on my shoulder. "He wanted to make it right. I just wish he'd had the chance," I whispered. "He did," she said softly. "You're here now. You know the truth. And you have the chance to lead this company the way your grandfather dreamed. That's what Richard wanted most in the end." I nodded, emotion choking my words. That night, I stayed in the study, surrounded by my family's books, their history, the ghosts of our past. The road behind had been painful. The truths I'd learned were heavy. But as I stared out the window into the quiet Boston night, I knew one thing for sure. No lie could survive the light forever. Tomorrow, the real work would begin. And I would be ready. She had. The company needed steady leadership during this transition, and I had a life in Seattle that couldn't simply be put on hold. But that night, I allowed myself a quiet moment of bittersweet vindication. My father had finally seen me, truly seen me, before the end. And now, I had the chance to honor not only his belated acknowledgement, but also the values my grandfather had built the company on. It wasn't the reconciliation I had once hoped for, but in its own way, it was a kind of justice. The weeks after the will reading blurred into a whirlwind of board meetings, legal paperwork, and public relations management. As expected, Jess filed a legal challenge, claiming our father had been unduly influenced and mentally unfit when he amended the will. Her lawyers requested a temporary injunction to prevent me from assuming control of Montgomery Properties. The hearing was set for a crisp Tuesday morning in early March. I arrived at the courthouse beside Mr. Anderson, armed with physician evaluations, business testimonials, and my father's video statement. Jess and Ryan sat across the courtroom, avoiding my gaze. The presiding judge, a sharp-eyed woman in her 60s, sifted through the documents before her. "Ms. Montgomery," she said at last, I find no compelling evidence of undue influence or diminished mental capacity. The medical reports are clear. Multiple credible witnesses confirm your father was of sound mind in his final weeks. And frankly, the video statement leaves no doubt as to his intent. She denied the request for an injunction. It was a victory, our first, but only a beginning. Jess's legal team signaled their intent to proceed with a full challenge. 2 days later, Gregory Foster requested an urgent meeting in my new office. The audit committee has finalized its investigation, he said. The findings are troubling. The report detailed a troubling pattern of financial mismanagement during Jess's tenure. Beyond the discounted Ethan deal, there were inflated vendor contracts, kickbacks, and evidence of personal expenses charged to the company, all of it pointing toward Jess and, by extension, Ryan. We believe it's best to present this to Jessica before the situation escalates further, Gregory said carefully. A prolonged court battle would be damaging to the company and to the family name. I agreed. That afternoon, Jess and Ryan arrived, expecting a settlement negotiation. Instead, Gregory laid the audit report before them. As the pages turned and the evidence mounted, Jess's face lost all color. Her lawyer, glancing through the files, whispered something sharp and urgent into her ear. Ryan looked like he might be sick. Finally, Jess spoke, quietly, hollowly. What do you want?
I had thought long and hard about that.
I want you to drop the challenge to the will, I said. In return, I'm prepared to offer you a role at Montgomery Properties, not as executive VP, but a position within the development team. You'd report to a director and work under oversight. Her eyes widened in disbelief. Why would you do that? Because despite everything, you do have talent, and the company could benefit from it. And because I think grandfather would want us to find a path forward. One that doesn't destroy what's left of this family. She looked away, emotions flickering across her face.
Guilt. Shame.
Resentment. Maybe even relief. And Ryan? She asked cautiously. That's more complicated, I said. Given his involvement with the Ethan deal and the Shell contracts, I don't see a future for him in the company. But, I paused, looking between them. If you both cooperate fully with the investigation and repay any misused funds, I won't pursue legal charges. Her lawyer gave a subtle nod, acknowledging the offer was fair under the circumstances. After a long silence, Jess agreed. The paperwork was finalized by that evening. Her legal challenge was officially withdrawn, and with the immediate threat resolved, I could finally turn my focus to leading the company. I spent the next few weeks meeting department heads, reviewing current projects, and learning the inner workings of a business I'd been told my whole life I wasn't meant to lead. But what I discovered was that my experience in tech gave me a fresh lens. Montgomery Properties had been slow to modernize. With the right systems, data tools, and digital strategies, we could increase efficiency, improve transparency, and innovate. At my first full board meeting as CEO, I laid out a strategic vision for the company's future. William Montgomery believed property development should serve communities, not exploit them. I began. We'll return to those roots. But we'll also use 21st century tools to get there. My plan included a full digital transformation, environmentally sustainable building practices, and affordable housing requirements for all new residential developments. To my surprise, the board's response was enthusiastic. Several members later confided they had grown concerned about the company's trajectory under Jess's leadership. Your father would be proud, Gregory said after the meeting. This is the kind of vision he was hoping to see. Jess started her new role with visible reluctance. Our interactions were cool, polite, and professional. But slowly, as she saw her ideas being considered, within a structured, accountable environment, some of the tension began to lift. About 2 months after the will reading, she knocked on my office door. Do you have a minute? She asked, her usual confidence muted. I gestured to the chair across from me. She sat, fidgeting with her watch. I wanted to say,
I'm sorry.
For intercepting Dad's letters.
For lying about you.
For all of it. I studied her expression, trying to read what lay beneath the apology.
Why? I asked.
Why did you do it? She exhaled, eyes dropping to her lap. Because I was scared. All my life, I was told the company would be mine. It became who I was. Then Dad started talking about you. How impressed he was. She trailed off, swallowing hard. You felt like you were being erased, I said quietly. She nodded. That's no excuse, she added. But it's the truth. For the first time in years, I believed her. What you accomplished on your own, she said quietly. I could see it in Dad's eyes. He was starting to reconsider everything, and I panicked. It wasn't a justification, but it was more self-awareness than I'd expected from her. I appreciate your apology, I replied after a pause. It doesn't undo what happened, but it's a step. She nodded. Ryan and I are separating. He played a bigger role in the financial issues than I initially admitted. He was the one who pushed hardest for the Ethan deal. Said it would set us up for life. I'm sorry to hear that, I said, and I meant it, despite everything. What will you do now? I asked. She gave a small, wry smile. Focus on the work, I guess. Try to earn back some trust. Maybe I'll learn something from my little sister for once. It wasn't a full reconciliation, not yet, but it was something. A fragile beginning. A path toward healing what had once felt irreparably broken. With the family situation gradually stabilizing, I shifted my focus to navigating my new responsibilities in Boston while maintaining my roots in Seattle. After thoughtful consideration, I arranged to split my time between the two cities. I continued in my role at Nextech, while building a capable leadership team at Montgomery Properties to support the company's transition and growth. 6 months into my tenure as CEO, I launched the Montgomery Foundation, a nonprofit devoted to affordable housing and community development in underserved areas. It was my way of honoring my grandfather's ideals while creating something of my own. At the Foundation's inaugural event, I stood at the podium, gazing out at a room full of familiar and new faces, my parents' business associates, family friends, my Seattle team, even Jess, seated quietly in the back. William Montgomery believed success in business should be measured not only by profit, but by the strength of the communities we build, I said. Because profit without purpose is empty. Innovation should serve people, not just balance sheets. A soft wave of applause followed. Glasses clinked. The toasts flowed. But later, I found myself alone in my father's study, the room that had once felt off limits, and now was mine to inhabit freely. On the desk sat my grandfather's portrait. Next to it, a wedding photo of my parents. And, beside them, a third frame I had added myself, the sailing photo from Maine. The 4 of us, captured in sunlight and smiles, before everything began to fracture. Helen entered quietly and stood beside me. They would be proud, she said gently. All 3 of them, even after everything. I turned to her. You really think so? She nodded. Your parents made serious mistakes. But your father saw the truth in the end. And your mother, for all her blind spots, she loved you both. I think she would have come around, given time. I wasn't entirely sure of that, but I appreciated the grace in her words. What about you? She asked. Are you finding peace in all of this? I thought for a moment before answering. I'm getting there. The company is thriving. The foundation's growing. Jess and I, we're working on it. Slowly. A small smile tugged at my lips. It's not the life I planned for, but maybe it's the life I was meant to have. Helen squeezed my hand. Your grandfather used to say, the most important legacy isn't what you build or bank, it's how you change people's lives. She gave me a warm look. You're honoring that legacy beautifully. She left me alone in the quiet. I turned toward the window, looking out over the Boston skyline. The city shimmered under the dusk, its lights twinkling like constellations, points of hope, of possibility. My journey had been winding, painful, full of broken expectations and long overdue truths. The reconciliation I'd yearned for had come too late in some ways, but perhaps just in time in others. Through their final acts, my parents had shown me who they believed I truly was. I thought of the last words in my father's journal. You are William Montgomery's true heir in every way that matters. Not because of birthright, not because of titles, but because of vision, because of values, because of integrity. That was the true inheritance. Not something that could be written into a will or contested in court, but something lived and earned. The road ahead still held challenges. There were wounds yet to heal, relationships still mending. But for the first time in a long while, I felt grounded, purposeful, at home. What about you? Have you ever had life take an unexpected turn, one that led you exactly where you were meant to be? Drop a comment below. Share your story. And if mine resonated with you, hit the like button and subscribe for more journeys through family, forgiveness, and finding your true path. Thanks for walking this one with me. I'm grateful you're here.